All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It is Jomo Stewart and crew here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation, and we are here for today's Energy for All Alaska Task Force. It is Tuesday, November 19th, and this is about perfect. We just got our first cold snap, so a great time to talk about heating sources, particularly the possibility of a natural gas pipeline. So, yeah, everybody, as usual. Okay, so our guests today are our friends over at the Alaska Gasline Development Corporation. I do believe they also have some folks from Wood Mackenzie with them there in the boardroom, but we'll let them do their own introductions. For the group, as always, remember that this is for our mutual benefit. So, although I am trying to monitor the chat box as well as the participant list, looking for hands, as always, please know that as we go through this presentation, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, you can post them into the chat. Yes, you can try to raise your hand. I'll do my best, but otherwise, please feel free to just simply take yourself off of mute and fire away. Frank is an old hand with the Energy for All Alaska Task Force. All right, well, without further ado, we'll get the show on the road. Mr. Richards, Mr. President, please.
Thank you, Jomo. Thank you, Fairbanks, for taking the time to be able to receive an update from us at the Alaska Gasline Development Corporation. As Jomo said, I'm Frank Richards. I'm the president of the Alaska Gasline Development Corporation, and I'm joined here today with some of our friends from Houston. So this colder weather is a little bit of a shock to them, but I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, and they're here with me today because we're going to have they are presenting today at a House Resources Committee hearing on an update of a report that they were contracted to do by the governor. So with that, I will allow my friends to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Costa Swift. I'm a vice president at Wood Mackenzie, and as Frank said, worked on this piece of economic analysis for them, and will be presenting the results of that study today.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Akira Takiguchi. I'm a managing consultant at Wood Mackenzie and mostly working with the gas and LNG sector for consulting here.
So quickly about Wood Mackenzie, if I may, they have intimate knowledge of this project. They were originally brought in 2016 when it was being run by ExxonMobil, BP, and Conoco to look at the viability of the project. And their report in 2016 was not favorable. Based on the economics at the time with the producers, the equity model that they were leading, it just was not an economic project. But at that point, they did provide some recommendations on ways to be able to make the project more viable. And that included looking at a tolling model structure, which we have adopted and move forward now and hopefully have achieved what we feel is an economic and viable project. But today I wanted to talk about the prospect of moving forward with a portion of the Alaska LNG project, and that is the pipeline first. And the reason for this is really around the issue of the energy crisis that with the declining reserves in Cook Inlet, that South Central Alaska and utilities here are looking at the potential need for importing LNG as a solution as opposed to using our natural resources on the North Slope. And so we've been looking at the opportunity to advance the pipeline portion of the Alaska LNG project first to be able to meet that need. And so that's what we're going to be discussing, as well as discussing the review and analysis that Wood Mackenzie has done to be able to look at that. So we find ourselves now, again, with the challenges in Cook Inlet, but with an opportunity to be able to utilize the Alaska LNG project and the portions of that project, in this particular case, the gas pipeline. And the reason we're able to do this is that all of the project has been fully permitted, gone through the rigorous federal and to a certain extent the state regulatory process, and we have those authorizations in hand, and we have the opportunity to be able to phase the project under the jurisdiction of FERC. Why this is important is that we feel that if we're able to execute the project starting as early as the next month, that we could have project delivering gas to Alaskans by 2031. Now, that may or may not meet the timeframes that the South Central utilities are going to need in terms of importing LNG. But that's another conversation that we're having with them on other alternatives. But we feel that from them for a long-term solution for imported LNG, because they have a greenfield development, that may actually take them longer to do because they have not gone out, acquired a site, developed a dock, and been able to go through the regulatory process of what it would take to have that dock built. The economics, we had built our own model to validate whether or not the pipeline gas could meet or beat the price of imported LNG. And it showed that we are able to. And then the legislature asked that Wood Mackenzie come in and validate that. So we feel that we're in a position now to provide energy for Alaskans utilizing Alaska's own natural resources. And the pipeline is ready to provide those long-term solutions for Alaska as the first phase of the Alaska LNG project. So as I've described, phase one is a pipeline from the North Slope leading down through the state to South Central Alaska. In this case, the pipeline would not have to go all the way to Nikiski to the liquefaction facility because we could tie into the existing local distribution network in South Central Alaska. And so that means that it's not quite an 800-mile pipeline, doesn't require the subsea crossing of Cook Inlet. And we have the opportunity to utilize gas from multiple sources on the North Slope. In this particular case, I believe when I last talked to you folks, we talked about a new prospect called that's being developed by Great Bear Pantheon. Their prospect is about 20 miles south of Prudhoe Bay, outside of the Prudhoe Bay unit. And they've offered us gas at a price of less than $1 per million BTUs, up to 500 million standard cubic feet. So that's a great opportunity for us to be able to utilize a new source of gas that doesn't require any pre-treatment because the composition of the gas has less than 0.5% CO2. So that's a very important point because it doesn't require then a gas conditioning or a gas treatment plant to be able to take the gas to pipeline quality specifications.
Well,
So
and utility quality?
Utility quality, correct.
Utility quality gas.
Right. So what we have in place in South Central Alaska is NSTAR, as the natural gas distribution system, has a pipeline spec of maximum 3% CO2. So phase one is the pre-build of a pipeline from a North Slope gas supply to meet the needs in Alaska. Phase two would be the ultimate construction of the full Alaska LNG plant, including the gas treatment plant on the North Slope and liquefaction facilities in South Central Alaska for export. So we went to the legislature nearing the end of the legislative process last year and identified that this ability to move forward. However, we needed to be able to execute what is known as front-end engineering and design, or FEED, to be able to bring the cost estimate for the pipeline portion up to $2024, to be able to review the execution plans, to be able to engage with those contractors and what they will need in terms of risk allocation. And we talked to them about the state of Alaska providing that $50 million appropriation. But we were at the end of the session and it just was not a viable option at that point. The capital budgets had gone through the committee process and they were in the waning days. So the governor convened a meeting with the legislative leadership, so the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and the co-chairs of the finance committees, to talk about the option. And what the outcome of that was, it was intent language that was put into the operating budget, directing that an independent third-party analysis be done to look at the viability of this project and also to look at the economic benefits of this project. Ergo, that's where Wood Mackenzie comes into play. And so they were contracted to do this economic viability. The first portion of that assessment was presented to our board in October. And then the second portion of their assessment was really looking at the economic benefits to the state of Alaska in total from just the initial phase of this project. And that's what they're going to be in total presenting to the legislature today. So in terms of phase one, I'm going to ask Wood Mackenzie to give you all just a high-level overview of the outcome of their report. But I'm pleased to say that again, to beat the punchline, that they have essentially identified that the phase one pipeline delivered cost of gas can meet or beat the cost of imported LNG. That the utilities have said they anticipate the cost range to be in. So with that, Costa, I would ask you to give a high-level overview of your study and the outcomes.
No problem. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for having me again. For those who don't know who Wood Mackenzie or Wood Mac is, we're a global research and consulting firm specialized in the energy value chain. As Frank said, we've been looking at and analysing the Alaska LNG since 2016. We redid the analysis in 2021 with some of the recommendations that we made in 16. And what we focus on the latest one is just that first phase of the pipeline. If Frank hops to the next one. So what the economic analysis compared, and this was using our numbers or numbers that have been provided to us, and then we've verified it using our data set and knowledge, is we compared the cost of importing LNG into Alaska versus a potential pipeline. So what the chart we're showing on slide 6 is, if we start on the left-hand side, is that's the total cost of importing LNG. Now you'll see two colors there. You'll see the dark blue and then the light blue. Obviously, we've had to use ranges of where the LNG could come from and how it gets there. So the 4 costs that we've considered in building up that is purchasing the molecule itself, shipping the molecule from wherever it's purchased to Alaska or Anchorage specifically, the cost of regassing that, turning that LNG molecule back into a usable gas molecule, and then connecting to the existing network. As you can see from that range is somewhere between $10.21 to $13.72, depending on the contracts you sign, where you sign it from, etc. Now, what cost hasn't been added into this is the cost of a new dock, a marine investment. Now, those costs can range up to $500 million from 50. They're really very dependent on meta-ocean conditions and location. And without anything being identified, we weren't able to get comfortable putting an exact figure on that. So that's been left out of that. On the right-hand side is what...
So if I may, so if you would please describe for the group in terms of where the LNG supply would come from.
So not a problem. We've looked at, when we're thinking about the LNG supply, we'd look at the Pacific market. And so the 3 places we looked at from a range perspective to get an understanding on where it could come from was West Coast Canada, West Coast Mexico, and East Coast Australia. They are the major ports or producers of LNG in the Pacific. We would then use a Asia landed price because they would all sell into Japan and Korea. And then effectively we netted the shipping cost back to Anchorage for that. So that's why you have that sort of $3.50 range, because it depends where you buy it from, the shipping netback, and the contract that you're using.
Thank you.
And then what we have on the right-hand side is the economic or the cost if you delivered by gas. Now, we ran some scenarios and sensitivities on this. What we have on the first column here, we're calling the base load. That's at $12.80. That is gas demand as of today in the South Central region of Alaska. Then as we move across to those darker blue ones, we have what the Wood Mac case is. And this includes some increased gas demand from increased industrial activity. And then as you go, we ran some other scenarios with another increase, so a new factory, a new ammonia plant coming on, etc. That's an additional industry. And then what would the gas price be under a full Alaska situation? So what the outcome of this is, as in a pipeline situation, the more gas that flows through the pipeline, the lower that tariff becomes. Therefore, the lower the cost of the delivered gas to the region. But even in the base load, as Frank was saying at the beginning, it is comparable with imported LNG with no excess demand. And then as you step up the demand, the price will actually come down to the domestic market.
If I
So
may
what-
start the questioning, relative to the dock facilities, does that include LNG storage capacity, or are we just talking about a dock, again, that can flow the LNG to the regas facility?
So the FSRU, which is the floating regas storage and regas facility, has storage in it, and that's incorporated in the cost. So we've assumed there'll be leasing an FSRU, somewhere between $1 to $1.50 per MMBTU of that cost, and there is storage on the FSRU.
So recognizing this is, again, this is aligned with the concept that the utilities have been talking about in terms of importing LNG into Cook Inlet, utilizing this floating storage and regas unit. It's essentially an LNG carrier that has the ability to store the gas, but then the regasification unit sitting topside, so it can take that LNG, it can move it from a liquid state to a gaseous state, and then pipe it directly onshore. But the challenge that we see is, again, no dock has been permitted in the Cook Inlet to be able to handle this size of vessel with the tides and with the ice and the winter conditions that we have, except for the dock that was designed for the Alaska LNG project with our 2 loading berths. But we haven't been asked about incorporating that, but I'm just utilizing that as a placeholder to say there is an existing permitted facility should it be necessary. But as Costa has shown, it comes at a considerable expense of up to $500 million.
And of course, the reason I ask is, speaking of expense, we have some experience up here building fixed site LNG storage, and it's rather expensive.
Understood. Okay,
Thanks.
so the cost stacks on the pipeline gas, and again, it's an important point for Alaska, I believe, is that we're different because as volumes increase through the pipeline, we're going to see a cost reduction to consumers in Alaska. And so that means that as we are out and talking to potential investors coming to the state of Alaska, whether they be resource developers in terms of mines, whether they be additional expansion or a restart of existing plants such as the urea ammonia plant in Nikiski or new ammonia production, or most recently, with the advent of artificial intelligence and the need for cloud computing, there is a keen interest, I will say, of developers, AI cloud owners to be able to have data centers. And so what data centers are essentially banks of computer that run the AI or run the training for the AI, but they consume a significant amount of power. And a lot of them are located in warmer climates, and so they expend about 50% of their energy use just cooling the computer banks. And that's why Alaska, with our environment, with our available land, our available water, and hopefully with abundant natural gas off the slope, we have the opportunity to present them a lower cost energy source, as well as a colder climate for their environment.
Awesome. And I guess my final question would be, and I thought, Frank, that you actually needed to get out of here at 8:45.
About 8:50 will work, Jomo.
Okay, all right. So I don't want to slow this down too much. But as far as on the very far right, when you say Alaska LNG, was that as if we converted like essentially all heating demand, energy demand over to natural gas? How low we could go?
Under the Alaska LNG scenario that we have on the right-hand side,
Oh, that's export.
That's export. So that does include connecting Fairbanks, but that's the export of the 2 trains at
3 trains.
3 trains, sorry. The 3 trains at exporting the gas through that. So the other point we'd like to in our modeling and how we considered it, there will be additional capex required for Alaska LNG to become online. But that extra capex, which is approximately $4 billion, the way we've done our modeling in this price, won't be burdened by the domestic consumer in Alaska. That extra cost will be burdened by the developers and therefore the offtake agreements to it. So that $2.23 is the domestic cost of gas under if and when Alaska LNG becomes online.
The volume discount, that's the 3.3 billion cubic feet a day flowing down the pipe.
Awesome sauce. Okay, thank you.
All right, now on to economic benefits. This project incorporates the design that we have fully permitted, and that's a 42-inch pipeline. So as you can envision, for Alaska's needs of, say, up to 200 million standard cubic feet a day, it's vastly oversized. And I will tell you, one of the main talking points of discussions that I've had with the governors about what can we do to reduce the size, reduce the overall cost. The challenge with moving the pipeline diameter is you'd have to reduce the pipeline diameter, you have to reopen the environmental process. And so that comes with additional time, with additional expense, and additional risk. So the concept that we're talking about is pre-build of the 42-inch as designed, as permitted, to be able to meet the needs initially for Alaskans and then grow to meet the needs of future customers. And so I'll ask Costa to talk about what those potential customers and benefits might be.
Not a problem. So what the 42-inch pipeline is, yes, it's over-spec'd, as Frank was saying, for the domestic customers, but it does allow that incremental or actually step change demand coming through. Now, what we also then talked about is that demand, well, having access to the gas, there's a potential to increase that demand, as Frank's already talked about, and the increased demand lowers price. Then the other pieces of analysis we did was understanding the economic benefits to Alaska. So we did analysis which surrounded, well, if the CapEx spend is $10 billion, approximately for phase one, how much of that CapEx will spend in-state to Alaska, and what that means for the gross value added. So how much will that increase the economy of Alaska? We also then looked at, well, what are the jobs created during this time, both construction and operation. We did compare that to if the LNG import was happening. And then what we also looked at was, well, what would the potential savings to Alaska being of this lower cost gas? So assuming the Wood Mac base case occurred at $11.20, how much would that save compared to importing LNG? So when we looked at those figures, the approximately Alaska LNG, I think Frank has it on the next slide, we would say that the pipeline itself would add about $10 billion of gross value added, so effectively $10 billion to the GDP of Alaska, and potentially save nearly $6 billion over its lifetime to the individuals in Alaska as well, just due to the price difference between the imported LNG and the pipeline sourced gas. So about $16 billion of economic impact overall to Alaska.
So that's a key point that the legislature wanted to understand, was what is the true economic benefits to the state from the building of a pipeline. So number one, it's the value of the pipe, but also number two, it's the savings that would be potentially available to Alaskans from purchasing gas off the pipeline at the cost of just Alaska consumption. So we go back to that very small amount of gas flowing through a very, very large pipe. It still provides a significant economic benefit to the state of Alaska.
We also looked at the jobs impact as well. So during the construction phase, over five years, upwards of 2,000 direct and indirect jobs would be created by the construction, and then ongoing operations between direct and indirect induced jobs. About 1,000 jobs for the next 40 years could potentially be created.
Okay, we have a question here in the room.
Hey, Jomo.
Yes.
It's Jim. Could I ask him to repeat the savings for consumers? Did you say $6 billion? And what time frame is that over?
That's the lifetime.
That's over the lifetime of the. That's over the lifetime. That's assuming the cost of imported LNG versus less what the Wood Mac assumption is. So $13.70 minus $11.20 times the total amount of gas, which is about 2.3 TCF of gas over that period of time, gets you
Wow.
to that savings number.
6 billion. Okay, thank you.
That was your question too, Dave?
That was my question. Just to clarify, that's over 40 years, if I understood correctly.
Correct.
Awesome. And then the other question I had, and you guys are smart people, so I assume this has been de-risked, but just there's no issue, I suppose, of putting in a 42-inch pipeline and only using a fraction of the capacity of that pipeline as far as operations?
As far as operations, it's okay. To get it up to, and Frank, please, you're closer to this. I would assume getting it up to the capacity to run Alaska, you'd have to add compression along the line.
That's correct. 8 compressor stations. So we did the analysis, and if you recall, one of our early assignments by the legislature was to look at building the in-state project, which we call the Alaska Standalone Pipeline Project. And in that one, it was again small volumes through a 36-inch. Again, the pipeline hydraulics would only require that there be a head compressor station in Prudhoe Bay, and then the gas would flow down the pipe all the way through the state to South Central without any additional compression. So that same design, those same hydraulic analysis were conducted utilizing the 42-inch with these volumes.
Does that help at all with some of the, I guess, reservoir challenge or just capacity challenges? Like, does that pipe, can those compressors be adjusted to impact any of the delivery challenges that NSTAR experiences with storage?
So again, we'd be meeting NSTAR spec, which, as I said, for CO2 is maximum 3%, and for inlets pressure would be 1,000 psi. So that's what we plan to use. Now, what NSTAR's challenges are downstream, I don't know.
Thanks.
Mr. Soley, I see you have your hand up.
I do. Thanks, Jomo. Rick Soley. This is fascinating and very interested in Wood Mackenzie's analysis. And your presentation is based on the full report. And I wanted to ask some questions about risk and just understand that a little better from your perspective. So the assumption is that we would build the 42-inch line with notionally 6% capacity. And these tariffs are rolling in that capital cost, of course, and the associated Citygate price. But is that, would you, in your experience, do you see pipelines like this built with 6% capacity? And then that would probably get to the financer and who takes the risk of the remaining 94% of shipping contracts that would fulfill a pipeline capacity. So
in this situation, the way we've considered it for the domestic market, the 94% capacity or potential capacity you could add is not out there. I'm trying to think about how best to phrase this. Is we've done the economics as if only the domestic market is used for that. So the other capacity to get to that $11.20 doesn't need to be contracted out, and that at $11.20 at the 42-inch pipe with that level of production coming through, so without the Alaska LNG, the developer of the pipeline still gets a 10% return on equity, assuming a debt to equity ratio of 75-25, a debt interest of $6.25%.
So 10%, that seems frankly low, but is that what you're seeing now in infrastructure projects like this?
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to ask about is just some of the timelines. It seems that we've commenced the capacity in 2031, which of course that's huckledebuck. And I think volumes are assumed to come in from some of the Anchorage utilities then, though they've got contracts into 2032. Are those things adjustable in your model without impacting the way that the economics are constructed?
The sculpting option of the volumes growing based on contracts.
Yeah, and
Well, I'm more talking about 2030. NSTAR has contracts into first quarter 2032, and I think the ramp, you're assuming in this that we're starting shipping in 2031, but you actually need NSTAR volumes in 2031. So I'm just trying to understand that a little bit.
So yeah, sorry. Let me answer that. Right now, the model does not account for a base load that, as Costa mentioned, it considers the current state of gas demand in Alaska, and forecasted it for 40 years. We're not accounting for any stoppage in any of the contracts right now.
Right. So, Rick, to your point, NSTAR's Gasline needs won't come on, and NSTAR represents again the potential aggregator for the utilities, but the other utilities will require some gas, in that from 2028 onward. The issue that we talked about in looking to be able to meet the needs when they're needed, we've talked with the pipeline developer about the sculpting option. In addition, so conversations between the developer and the utilities about what the needs are and how to best represent that. It would be that smaller volumes would come up initially. Maybe the prices would have to be contracted with them so that we would cover some of the initial debt capacity, but the equity returns may be pushed later on when the gas volumes are up to the full 200 million standard cubic feet volumes. So it'll be worked contractually to be able to, and we see that it is truly still economic an opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. I got a couple more, but there's probably other questions. I'll wait, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we do have Mr. Terrio.
Yes, Frank, on the earlier side that talked about the delivered price, I assume that's delivering the gas into an energy basis and not necessarily to the final customer. Is that correct?
That's correct, Gene.
Okay, and then I think a previous question may have been trying to get at, is there capacity to pack the pipe and actually provide some of the seasonal swing demand by drawing resource out of the pipe?
Interesting concept. We didn't look, so the line pack on that pipe is going to be very large volumes, right? 800 miles, 42-inch, 200 million a day. I haven't done the analysis to see how long that pack would be available to meet the potentially seasonal swings. But that's something what we can do under front-end engineering and design.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so Jomo, just to recognize some time, so I'm going to, if I may, just quickly push forward here and then take some questions at the end, and WoodMac folks will still be here and available.
Yes, please.
Okay, so quickly, a high-level overview of the schedule. Again, we are we've completed the work by WoodMac's third-party validation. We are talking to the House Resources Committee today to essentially follow up with the legislature about the need for a $50 million appropriation to fund the feed. If we're able to get that on a fast-track basis, we would enter into feed early in 2025 and be able to complete that in 12 to 14 months, at the same time working on the contracts, which will underpin the financing. And then ultimately 4 years of construction to first gas in that 2031 timeframe. So that's what we are proposing, and that's the conversations that we're having with the pipeline companies as well as with utilities as customers. And then feed, as I described earlier, this is again front-end engineering and design, which is again a technical term to essentially take us more towards the final design components, but ultimately to provide for an update on the cost estimate and the execution plans on delivering the pipe in the schedule we just talked about. So that's what the contracts will be based on, is that overall cost estimate. That'll be a recognition in the delivered price. And so that's why it's very important that we have this conducted to be able to validate and assure that the producers or that the utilities are going to be receiving gas at a price that's going to be competitive against the imported LNG. And then the concept that we talked about with the legislature, what we're calling a feed backstop. And this is where our engagement with a North American pipeline company to conduct the feed. They've identified a budget of up to $50 million. They're willing to undertake this feed. They will do it at their expense. But they wanted to make sure that if the project did not take a final investment decision, meaning did not go forward and it was actually executed, that they would like to be reimbursed for their cost up to the $50 million cap. So right now it is utilizing a North American pipeline company that has the credentials, that conducts feed on a daily basis, recognizing that they have the ability to execute the contracts with the design consultants and include Alaskans in those design efforts, to be able to march this forward in the time frame that they've said to us they can conduct in 12 to 14 months. So it's key that it's not just AGDC conducting a feed, it is working with a pipeline company that is reputable, knowledgeable, and has the ability to do this in the time frame that we're talking about. And the backstop would be in the form of a line of credit that they could see that the state of Alaska was supporting this, and that would be drawn on should the project not take final investment decision. And then, as this is just a pictorial display of the cost of energy as we know it right now. Again, this may be somewhat dated in terms of the overall costs per million BTU in terms of fuel cost or trucked LNG. We developed this last summer. But more importantly, on the right-hand side of the stack was the numbers that Costa provided, baseload of 1280 or the Wood Mac case, which they feel is more viable at $11.20, and then ultimately getting down to that lower range with Alaska LNG down into the very low cost that would be beneficial for all Alaskans. And then we've talked about the benefits to Alaska from this, certainly the benefits to Fairbanks, again, the opportunity for pipe gas could help lower your costs, help in terms of the air quality, the industrial developments that the pipeline would allow to grow or be developed is tremendous. And that only comes not only from the prospects that I talked about earlier, from restart of existing plants to new ammonia plants. This pipeline first concept, when we presented this with Senator Sullivan in the countries of Japan and Korea, was truly a game changer in their mind, because it showed that Alaska was willing to take the risk to develop the pipeline, and organically they saw this as a major de-risker of the project and a great opportunity for LNG contracts that they would be willing to sign from Alaska. And so that, Mr. Chairman, is again a very quick overview of our prepared remarks. The more detailed presentation will be done today by Wood Mackenzie. That presentation will be online, available under the House Resources Committee. So if anyone has interest, their full report is also on our website, as well as on the Alaska Legislature website from today's presentation. So more than happy to answer questions in the time that we have remaining.
Right, we do have a few minutes, so I will open up the floor to questions. Rick, hit it.
Thanks, Jomo. So wanted to talk about regret costs. The governor's energy security task force last year, as you know, they issued a report, and the gas pipeline was a priority from that task force. And one of the things they talked about in this discussion of the export pipeline versus an in-state pipeline was to minimize the regret costs associated with trying to deal with the Cook Inlet natural gas shortage. And I'm wondering about discussions with the utilities in Anchorage to ensure that. And then I guess when we talk about regret costs, I'm mindful of the Fairbanks utility, the interior gas utility, that would probably have regret costs associated with the North Slope trucking project, as I can't imagine that a contract would allow them to exit without paying for that infrastructure. But So can you talk about regret costs and how that gets handled in here and how we can minimize it?
So, Rick, the conversations, I'll take on the prospect of the utilities in South Central Alaska. Again, this has been a conversation that they've been looking to find a solution now for about a year and a half since Hillcorp identified that they would no longer sign long-term contracts to deliver gas. So they've been looking at any and all opportunities to be able to meet the needs that they have. And in particular, the first to fall was Homer Electric, which lost their long-term contracts in April of this year, 2024. And now NSTAR is looking to backfill those contracts, in 2025. Then we're going to see the fall off of the contracts for Chugach Electric in 2028. And that's where the metal really hits the road, where they need to have a surety of supply to be able to keep the lights on in South Central Alaska. Now, when you talk about regret costs, ideally they would have had a solution identified and executing to achieve that today, but they don't. And that's why we have wanted to work with them on this opportunity at the earliest possible time so that we can achieve something that will provide them with a long-term solution to be able to meet their generation supply needs. Now, how they factor in the regret costs into their decisions, I can't address because I don't know. But I think that what you were part of in that energy task force included all the utilities. So from Matanuska Electric to Chugach Electric to Golden Valley and Homer Electric, working collaboratively together. I was sitting on the outside just watching, so I don't really know all the intricacies and the discussion points, but we just raised our hand to say we have an option and we'd like to be able to execute this for Alaska.
Appreciate that. For the record, I know this is informal meeting. I'm not representing Golden Valley here today, though I am a director. Tower Hill did have a representative of the mining industry on that task force. Well, Rick, I know that
Rick, if you don't mind, we do have Elena online and her hand is up. And since we only have a couple of minutes,
let's have her answer the IGU regret.
Okay. Elena, please.
Thank you. Elena Sadet with Interior Gas Utility. So to Mr. Solly's earlier comments, we do have in our contract with Harvest and Hillcorp one way to reopen those contracts, and that is if a large volume of gas, such as the Alaska LNG, if a contract for a large volume of gas from Prudhoe Bay or surrounding area gets executed, we can reopen the contract and either renegotiate cost or get out of it. So to that, for Frank, I can clearly see that the full Alaska LNG project lowering the cost of natural gas to Fairbanks. When you say that that there is going to be lower cost in Fairbanks, considering the significant amount of infrastructure that we would have to build ourselves, such as the spur to Fairbanks, pressure reducing stations, etc. Do you still make that statement about natural gas being cheaper in Fairbanks in phase one?
In phase one. So
you might want to go back to that cost stack slide. That'll do.
Or
no, that one was fine.
Okay. So Lena, the offtake numbers that you see here would be the delivered cost into the various offtake locations. And so for Fairbanks, again, what you're referring to is the 30+ mile lateral that would have to be constructed to be able to fit into the Fairbanks natural gas system. We are in conversations with a pipeline company that is keenly interested to develop that. They know full well that the cost is going to be a significant factor for Fairbanks, and they're factoring that into their consideration. the overall cost estimate and build out for that spur. Did you include that?
No, we didn't. So that $11.20 or $12.80 if the base load or the Wood Mac case is to the inlet of the spur. There would have to be the additional cost added on for that spur to connect to Fairbanks.
So that's something that we can look at in terms of the model and what it would represent in terms of providing a cost to Fairbanks at the city gate, if that would be of interest.
It's of interest.
It certainly would.
Surprise.
Resounding yes, okay. All right, I appreciate it. Jomo, Fairbanks representatives, everybody, thank you for taking the time. I apologize, but I'm double, triple stacked today, and appreciate the opportunity. Again, Wood Mac's report is available online, and there'll be more detailed information presented this afternoon.
President Richards, we really, really appreciate it. By the way, what time is that hearing?
Hearing starts at 1 o'clock.
All right, so now everybody knows. If you go ahead and Google Alaska Legislature, you'll get to the Alaska Legislature site and you can negotiate your way to. This is House Resources or Senate Resources?
House Resources.
House Resources. Okay, so again, you can start your search at about 12:50, so we can all be online.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like they've logged off. We can talk amongst ourselves. Hey, Gene, I see that you're off mute. Do you have anything for us?
Well, good questions there about the spur line cost. I was going to chime in and ask whether they had considered distanced delivery rates. I don't think they have. And of course, this community interior is going to be pushing to have the spur line incorporated. We've always, questioned there or pushed for that, but we'll have to wait and see. I also was very interested in whether there's any indication that the governor is going to support the $50 million backstop in his budget submittal. That's approximately a month away. And the governor's not always been supportive of this project. Certainly, he has indicated a change in attitude as the years have gone by, and now with federal support, mentioning support for the project and the fact that we've got the permits in hand. There is tremendous value to actually having a project that you have slogged your way through that permitting process, so that you can actually do the feed, knowing that you're not going to have to go back and ask permission to build. We of course wish we would have continued that on Susitna. We've had no shortage of regret in the state of Alaska for not actually de-risking projects by getting through the permitting process. And that lengthy, anywhere from 5 to 10 year permitting process is always something that bogs us down. In this project, we've slogged our way through that, and there's tremendous value. So
my only big gripe relative to this project is with all the time and money expended, we actually should have, I believe, a whole number of configurations permitted. Smaller diameter is really what I'm saying. I do wonder, and I'll go ahead and get to the hands in a moment, but I do wonder about the possibility of getting some federal support for this project under a national security argument. Part of the value of this project, now that we're on the front line, the Arctic is recognized, Alaska is recognized as the front line relative to those across the pole. Being able to bring north-south energy security to all of Alaska's major military installations, I would think would have real value to the DoD. If that argument was made by our CODEL, if we could actually get some fairly robust federal support. $4 billion is a lot of money from the Alaska perspective, but it's peanuts relative to the federal budget. Rick, if you don't mind, we've got a Julie C. with her hand up. I'd like to go ahead and let her have a chance.
Sure.
Julie? There we go.
Hi, this is Juliet Shepherd. I'm not sure why it says Julie C, but sorry, apologies. The question was regarding clarifying the additional 500 million that was referenced. The audio cut in and out, and I wasn't able to clarify. Is anyone able to?
Yes, that was
Speak to that.
regarding Wood Mackenzie's analysis. That was kind of like their swag number for shoreside facilities to facilitate import of LNG. Dockage.
Plan B.
Great, thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome. Rick.
Sure. I guess kind of on Fairbanks strategy and big picture, just thinking out loud. So the incoming president has articulated support for the Alaska Gasline pipeline, which doesn't mean anything other than it was, his articulated support. That would have to come in the form of potentially appropriations or other types of things, modifications to loan guarantees. One thing that administratively I think could be done virtually immediately, responding to your suggestion, Jomo, is I think the Department of Defense has some carbon limits and that are impacting the bases around the state, and that could have some immediate effect if you changed some of those requirements and didn't take them out of potential natural gas customers. That's kind of administrative, not appropriation, which would be interesting. The kind of the issue as far as Fairbanks goes and on the lateral and some of these other things, to me, this is a no-brainer to advance the front-end engineering and design feed. These other questions of risk, of cost, what will happen to the cost once we see the final report, that's when I think the legislature or the state will have a better understanding of how this project could shape out. But the lateral line should get rolled into the overall cost, in my view, and that'll be a discussion we will have with vigor at the right time.
All right. I will say I did forward Frank last week a copy of, if you all recall, when this task force was first started, it was the Fairbanks Cost of Energy Task Force. And then some years ago, it turned into the Energy for All Alaska Task Force. And so I did actually send Frank that old presentation from 2009 with the Energy for All Alaska concept that, taking a bit of ownership within the pipeline, making some money off of that ownership share and reinvesting that money to create, frankly, energy hubs around the state of Alaska, where the LNG, once we are producing it, would be delivered on a cost equivalent basis to at least those 7 energy hubs, and extra money using the interior gas utility and the interior energy project as a model, some seed funding to help put in the pipes and the infrastructure that would allow Alaskans to actually tap into that lower cost energy source. So I did forward that on to him. It's a bit outside of his purview, but I wanted to remind him that we've thought about this a bit. Rip Brooks.
Yes, I think we need to ask all the questions, but we really need to focus on this and make a yes/no decision way sooner than later. If we get into yes in the middle of May, we've lost a construction season. So let's get all these questions out, really focus on this between now and January 22nd, so we can get a decision out there. The other thing, in the resource committee, they're going to be talking about alternatives for Cook Inlet gas, because somehow we got to get from here to whenever this is done. And there's going to be more information on that this afternoon. Same deal. And we're not looking for ideal, I don't think. We're looking for in-state gas pipeline versus importing LNG is the main deal. And the same thing in Cook Inlet. Do we want to produce some gas for essentially probably no royalty? But do we want the gas, or do we want to import LNG? To me, it boils down to that. And then everything else is gravy.
The only reason I bring up the Energy for Alaska concept is, again, there's a whole bunch of communities that are
Yep.
not along this route.
Yep.
We're even one of them. We're proximate to the route, but we're not on the route. So when I think of a potential speaker, Edgeman,
Yep.
or a co-chairs, Donnie Olson or Lyman Hoffman, what gets them to a yes?
Right.
Hey, Ms. Shepherd, please. Oh.
Sorry, that was up from previously.
Okay. All right.
I've got a question. I apologize. I was a few minutes late, but I don't think there was enough time to talk about it. But you guys have been involved in the conversation longer than I have. When we're talking about a 42-inch pipeline that's a 6% capacity, I would imagine that an investor, developer needs a pretty high level of security that off-takers are going to exist. So in order for this all to make sense, for this to be built with only 6% of the capacity used, what are the take-or-pay contracts like, and what will each of the utilities, MEA, CEA, NSTAR, HEA, GVA, the big consumers, what would the terms of those contracts need to be? Is that take or pay for 40 years at a certain cost? Like, has that been discussed at all, I guess?
We're going to find out. Great question for a legislator to ask. Mr. President Terrio.
Thanks, Shomo. Let's see. There was just a question. Oh, with regards to rural legislators, keep in mind that if we manage our cost of power, specifically electricity, down, that means the delta between our power and rural power goes up, so they get more benefit from power cost equalization. So that helps. And also when Pete Kelly was Senate President, I believe, he worked with Senator Hoffman to put some language into Alaska statute that basically says if the state's involved in a gas pipeline and some of the revenue that's made off of the operation of that enterprise, a portion of that revenue then gets steered towards a mechanism to spread it out to rural Alaska. Now that would take additional action by a future legislature, but there has been some thought given to mechanisms that ensure that just Alaskans along the rail belt don't benefit from the gas molecules being transported off the North Slope, that there is a mechanism to share some of that benefit, and that hopefully we have legislators that continue to remind the Bush delegation of that, because there are new members of the Bush delegation that might not be aware of that, and the past players have to constantly be reminded that no, we've reached out to try and make sure that you get benefit in the future too.
Good reminder. And I did discuss that with Frank also last week. Rick.
Well, two things. One, responding to Mr. Messier's comment, I think that is a relevant question. What I've understood is what's needed now, I think, is not binding commitments, but expressions of interest at how much would a utility buy, how much natural gas, for what period, at what price. I think later there's probably a need for binding commitments, but those are questions that should get asked and answered. The other thing related to the Wood Mac report that very much gets into what Senator Terrio was talking about is the assumptions by Wood Mackenzie on the oil and gas tax rate. They assume a 2% tax rate as opposed to the normal 20 mils. So clearly that will need to have legislative buy-in. There's a public purpose to why you would have a lower tax rate, but that I think is necessitates the need for push legislators, particularly the North Slope borough, to support this idea of a gas pipeline with a 2 mil tax, not a 20 mil. But again, the feed is the advancing of this discussion, and so we can have a real discussion with the real facts. But I think that's another one we got to keep at the forefront. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
I love that you called me Mr. Chairman. Actually, it makes me very uncomfortable. I am not your chairman.
You got the shut off, so you can shut me down.
Actually, you'll find this amusing. I should actually turn off the recording first. I got roped back into being on the Executive Compensation Commission. Like I didn't have enough problems with that a year ago, and actually I am the chairman. They made me the chairman of this thing, so that should be fun. You're welcome for your raise, Mike. So, all right. Well, we are at we're beyond the top of the hour. anything else we want to bandy about before we shut her down?
Who should be the point of contact for all these questions so we can get them out?
That's a good question. Do we know off the top of our heads, do we have a representative on House Resources? I don't think we do.
I'm happy to do that, but if somebody else wants to, that's okay too. And we can just get the information out, get as far along as we can.
Did everybody hear that?
As we can.
Mike is offering to be our point of contact for the task force. If anyone has questions that we want answered there in House Resources or beyond. So did everybody get that? That's appreciated. Let me see. So yeah, I don't think we.
Maxine Dybert is a member of the committee.
She is a member of the committee. Okay. Okay, so that gives us 2.
Yeah, but Jane might need to talk to them.
Right.
And I was wondering, in the chat there, it mentions, and what is the status on permitting for the lateral for the Fairbanks leg?
I don't know if there is at all, because they kicked it over to the community, so we would have to be driving them.
I presume that,
permitted, Clark.
Yeah,
That's an issue. It would fall under AGDC,
I think it is an issue.
I think. They did, I believe, and somebody probably would remember this better than me. I think Alaska Standalone Pipeline may have incorporated the design of the lateral.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. At least that's a start. Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious as to cost. When I was, it's been a long time. I mean, I left the IGU in 2018. At the time, the discussion of having a transmission line, like a barbell between the large storage facility here in Fairbanks and the satellite out in North Pole, 15 miles was, I want to say, was it $15 million? About $1 million a mile at the time, Elena?
Yeah.
Connecting the Fairbanks to our North Pole systems via 12-inch. We just did it was a 15-mile. It was a 13, almost 14-mile run for $15 million. But that's a 12-inch, and that does not include the cost of a pressure reducing station.
And was that on the levee or something? Broadly path?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Was it running along the levee? Is that how they planned it? Along the river.
I'm not sure on that.
Okay.
I just heard Mr. Prusak. So thanks for the memory backup there. Yeah, Mr. Prusak.
No problem.
Appreciate it, brother. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, again, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much. Remember, thank you, Ms. Klukas did post the link to the legislative page there in the chat. Again, otherwise you can just Google Alaska legislature. And if you look over on the left-hand side, actually on the banner on the homepage along the top, you'll see floor calendar, daily schedule, but you also just see meetings and live now. And so if right around 1 o'clock you log in, you should either be able to check the meetings or just click on the live now, because I don't know that there are any other hearings today. And you should be able to log into that to watch. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. I don't have anything lined up immediately, but I will tell you a couple of months ago, I guess about a month ago, when the Alliance had their Fairbanks Industry Forum up here, there was a presentation about a novel energy storage mechanism. It's actually based on 7,000-year-old technology, but I found it quite intriguing. And so I'm going to try to run that cat down and see if we can get a presentation, because if it's legit, it might in fact be a game changer. Again, we're using lithium-ion batteries at very high costs. This would offer a thermal storage opportunity at much lower cost. So again, I'm going to try to run that down. I'll send it your way. Also, RJ gave a presentation relative to what was the IGU's North Slope pad, which is being utilized now by Hillcore. That's where the Harvest LNG facility is. But on the other side of that pad, Fairbankson is working on a proposal for ethanol production. And so I was going to see if I could get them in here as well. Either way, though, y'all be good. I'll let you know when things are coming together, and just have a great rest of your day. And I think GVEA is our guest at the chamber luncheon today. And so it'll be Mr. Million's big stepping out, but we'll also get a nice update relative to our our electric utility. All right, so have a great energy day, and we'll talk to you soon.